Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh my, do we have a great show for you. It's another one. Let me tell you something. Bill Treasure is going to rejoin us again. We've done actually one book he wrote on his own previously called Get Courage.
Courage Goes to Work.
Courage Goes to Work. Thank you. And then we did John Coach Havlick,
with the leadership killer.
Yep, which was great on hubris and humility, and it was one of the best. It was fabulous having him on the show. This book, Leadership, 2 Words at a Time. Let me tell you, the title says "Simple Truths for Leading Complicated People." Now, here's what Bill makes a mistake about his book. Oh, you go, what? You just said that? Yeah, well, here, because he says it's a leadership book for new emerging leaders, but it's not. It's for every leader. Let me explain. We're in the springtime or approaching to it here at the end of February, going into March, and there's a thing called spring training in baseball. And here's what we know about baseball. And generally any sport, I don't care if it's soccer, I don't care whatever the sport is. You know what? The veterans and the rookies come together before the season starts and they start working on their fundamentals, their fundamental skills, right? It doesn't matter how long you've played. It doesn't matter if it's your first year or if it's your 20th year. They all get together and they field ground balls, they take swings, they make throws, they have to do all the fundamental things. Leadership, 2 words at a time, is your fundamental spring training book. Whether you're a seasoned leader or you're an emerging leader or you have a desire to be a leader, this is your fundamental spring training toolkit book right here. And so what I want you to do is I want you to call your friends. I want you to call leaders. I want you to your children. I want you to talk to your college students. I want you to talk to senior leaders, C-suite people, whoever they are. This show is going to be for them because this is, I'm just telling you, this book is absolutely fantastic. It's fun. It's funny. And it's poignant. It's timeless. I don't care. The truths in this book are for today, and they're going to be for 20 years from now, and they were 20 years ago. They're going to be for 30 years from now, 40, 50, 100 years from now. These same truths in this book are going to ring true. Now, before we get to him, we're going to do what we do every week, right? We talk to you about where are you at in the areas of your life, right? We're 4-part people: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. You know what's interesting about leadership? 2 words at a time. If you're not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, guess what? You're probably not being the leader you could be. I didn't say. I'm just saying that's what Bill says here, and I agree with him. Right. So what we do here is we have you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, this area of my life is not very good. 10 being this area of my life is awesome. So when it comes to the physical area and you were to evaluate yourself on eating right, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, watching your diet, going to the doctor on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average, what would you give yourself? Now, here's the deal. Whatever that number is, I don't want you to be alarmed and going, oh my gosh, I'm a 2. What am I going to do physically? Okay, listen, you're not going to go from a 2 to a 10. Let's just go from a 2 to a 2.5. You can change something. Okay? That's what we want to do here. All right, so that's your first number. Second number is your mental intellectual number. Here's the thing. Interestingly enough, Bill Treasure talks about you need to be in constant learning. That's the intellectual part, right? So when you think about yourself being an active learner, being an active participant and learning your skill, your craft, what you do, understanding the business of business. Are you learning? Are you keep on learning that? Are you doing that? Whatever that may be. If you're a salesperson, how are you doing improving how you sell? Right? You got to be an active participant in learning and growing, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you talk about your learning? Right? That's your second number. Third number is the emotional number. Real simple. A lot of work on emotional quotient by Daniel Goleman. Tons of work. But here's the deal. We're going to break it down like this. How well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure? By the way, do you think that's important to leadership? I would say so, and so does Bill, by the way. And then the second part is how well are you able to understand and tap into the emotions of others? You think that's important to leadership? Yeah, so does Bill. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your emotions? and your ability to control them and tap into others. All right, that's your third number. And then the fourth number is the spiritual number. Here's the deal spiritually. We all have something inside of us, right? Some people call it a will, the spirit of who we are. And we connect with something that drives us, that goes beyond the emotions, the physical, and our mental abilities. And you know, what brings you back to peace? What brings you back to centeredness in the midst of your chaos? And is it working? I mean, is it God? Is it nature? Is it meditation? Is it yoga? Is it something else? Is that working for you? And is it refreshing your spirit, and that you can have a sense of peace in the midst of chaos, or a sense of joy in the midst of difficult circumstances? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how's that going for you? Those four numbers are like the air in the tires of your car, right? So if you think about it, what happens if one of your tires is really, really low? The car tends to lean and go off in a different direction, or it doesn't run efficiently or effectively. And if all four tires are really low, you can ruin the car, right? So we want to bring our tires up to the right height and to the right level, so that the car, and so that you can run efficiently and effectively. And speaking of someone who does that, his name is Bill Treasure. He is the Chief Encouragement Officer at Giant Leap Consulting, a courage building company that exists to help people and organizations be more courageous, to drive superior performance. He's dedicated to advancing the new organizational development practice of courage building, a concept that he introduced in his international best-selling book, Courage Goes to Work. He's been featured, his insights have been featured all over, like Washington Post, New York Daily News, Chicago Tribune, Entrepreneur Magazine, amongst others. He's conducted over 1,000 corporate workshops for places like NASA, Saks Fifth Avenue, eBay, U.S. Bank, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Spanx. He lives in the great state of North Carolina in Asheville with his wife, Shannon, and 3 children. And we're going to get to talk to him again, because he's a pleasure to have on the show. So welcome back to the show, Bill Treasure.
Jay,
Great to have you back.
I am blushing. That was a fantastic intro in all different directions. Thanks for your really kind words about the book as well. I'm super flattered, and I take your compliments really well, because I know you know a lot about leadership. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and I know you're an avid book reader.
Yes.
To hear you to compliment it, it warms my heart. But so
Well,
thank you.
It's deserved. It's well deserved. It's a great book. I think we need to start off with something that you say in the introduction that we need to kind of just get people's attention. And it was something that the Global Leadership Forecast did, and it was 83% of organizations say it's important to develop leaders, but only 5% have fully implemented plans to do so. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of businesses are small businesses, probably more small businesses in the United States and probably in the world than any other form of business. So a lot of them probably can't afford it. A lot of them might be mom and pop shops with like 10 people or less. I think there's still things that they can do, but making the investment, a lot of times it's just not there. And even in big companies, they might pay it lip service. I'll sometimes have a client that'll be like, we want to change and modify the culture because we want to get us positioned for the future, and we need dramatic change here. Can you come in and do a 2-hour workshop for us for 25 people? It's like, you're not going to get anything on that. So I think sometimes it's a matter of ignorance. They don't know what they don't know when it comes to leadership development. They don't know what they could be doing. And I would say start small. Even if you start with just a lunch and learn or a internal library, pass the book around. And I also go into that point in that chapter that doesn't absolve you, individual leader, from developing yourself. Are you worth the investment? Regardless of what your company's doing, I hope they do invest you. But you can't just use that as abdication and say, well, look, nobody's investing in me. Oh, well, no, you got to invest in yourself because you're worth it.
Right. You make a point in this introduction here too, as well, that you say, for instance, that too often the biggest inhibitor of great results isn't a lack of resources or a clear plan, which, by the way, we default to. It's the idiosyncratic personalities of team members clashing with one another or pulling in different directions. Why do we focus so much on the resources that we don't have, or the support that we don't have, or the goals or the plans, instead of like looking at the personalities that surround us?
Yeah, it's the interpersonal funk that gets in the way of stuff, right? and now move an individual contributor. And first of all, congratulations. The individual contributor is shown to really produce really well. They do a great job. They have technical know-how, operational know-how. Let's reward them with a team. And we don't give them a playbook, and we don't give them any training, and we dump them into a manager role. And they don't realize that at least 50% of their time is going to be spent being an unpaid, unqualified psychiatrist. All that interpersonal stuff that gets in the way, that causes the muck, that hems up the system, so you can't move forward. So you're right. I think that it's common, and I think maybe it's because it's people, we can grasp this stuff. We can figure out the operational aspect of our job, and in a way, it's cut and dry. It's a little black and white. I do this formula, I get this thing. I pull this lever, this comes out. But with people, it's idiosyncratic. It takes a little bit more art than science. With person, I'm going to motivate them this way. With this person, they're going to resent it if I do. So I got to figure all of that out. But I think the investment needs to be there. And if you got moved into a management role and your company's not investing in you, recognize it's not enough to have know-how, operational know-how. You're going to have to learn how to get not just smart, but people smart.
This is the fundamental issue, I think, at the heart of any leadership. Great leaders know people. They just do. They just know the greatest leaders that you have ever been. I know the greatest leaders I've ever been around. They just have a way of knowing people, and so often we have a whole chapter here called results matter. Okay, I get that, and results do matter. I'm not saying that they don't, but I believe that you can't get to the results if we don't really know the people. Yeah. Right? I mean, right? I mean, I feel like it's where we fall the shortest.
Yeah. It's a means and ends thing. Leaders get very fixated on the end. And you're right. We have a whole chapter to get results. You got to get results. A whole two words dedicated just to that idea. And that pressure is never going to go away. But you get results through your treatment of people. People are the means to the results. But too many leaders focus on, give me the egg, give me the egg, give me the golden egg. I want another golden egg, give me the production, right? But they don't think about the means towards that until something happens in their own leadership life, a blowback. Maybe they have a career derailment. Maybe they get a 360-degree feedback that punches them upside the face. Maybe they get 3 people that quit and identify them in an exit interview as being the reason that they left. There'll be some leadership moment where this golden egg, just production, all that focus without attending to people, it will have a blowback. It does. You might be able to fake it for a long time without attending to people, but at some point in time, and you will plateau your career and probably decimate your career if you don't start paying attention to the means to the ends, not just the ends.
And I know it's difficult to measure this, right? And I think this is where sometimes, great left brain leaders who are great with numbers can sometimes fall short, is because they constantly look at the numbers, but they're not looking at the things that are difficult to measure, like people skills. Yeah. Because this is a hard one to measure, right?
Right. Well, and it's also partly on the priority of the organization, right? Like they can say, people matter. People are our greatest resource. First of all, if they say people are their greatest resource, I'm already suspect. Because they're people, they're not cogs in a machine. But we'll say people are our greatest resource. And then they'll keep promoting the guy who makes the revenue happen, who closes the deal, the great rainmaker and business developer that has all this body wreckage behind him of all the people who have left the organization. The bodies are buried in the backyard. But look at the numbers he brings in. Yeah, but look at the numbers he's causing in terms of the cost to our reputation, to our having to hire new people, to the brain drain of people leaving. So I think that's, sometimes we have our priorities wrong as an organization. We reward the rainmaker. It's not always the case. Sometimes rainmakers are absolutely emotionally attuned. But sometimes we are rewarding the person who gets the result that we want, often financial, but we're not factoring the results of the bringing people with you, the legacy that you're creating, the bench strength that you might be developing, which act as insurance policies for a company.
And this leads to part 1, because if you're going to learn about the idiosyncrasy, yes, if you're going to, yes, that word, hello, Jay, anytime you're ready, you can say that. The idiosyncratic differences in personality. You've got to be able to lead yourself,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
because you have those idiosyncrasies too as a leader. And it's the one thing to, it's you spot it, you got it. But if you're always focused on them, I got to change them. I got to make them more accountable. That's a famous phrase that we hear from every leader. I got to make them more accountable, right? But we got to turn that lens on ourselves first. We got to make sure that we really understand our value system, if we even have identified it, what our strengths are, and what the overuse of those strengths are, the shadow that they start to cast. We have to do some self reflection, self evaluation, self exploration, self assessment. And sometimes we got to change if we want to be more effective as a leader. Instead of always focusing on what they are all doing wrong, we have to first turn that lens on ourselves, which is why the first part of the book is, leading yourself. The 3 areas of leadership fitness, I call it, right? Lead yourself, then you got to lead others, which is, second section, and then leading work. But it starts with, am I demonstrating self-leadership? The way I put it, Jay, is that nobody wants to follow you if you're a mess. If your life is personally disorganized, if you literally are disorganized and you got stacks of crap on your office desk, who's going to get confidence from your leadership? So it's got to start with you leading you.
Yeah, and this is so imperative, because I think, and I'm speaking as a psychological professional now, I think one of the most difficult things that we do is to take an honest inventory of who we are. And I think this is very difficult, especially senior leaders. It's very difficult if they've had any success to take a look back at their own self and say, okay, well, what are some of my own issues? And then to own them. And I wonder, Bill, as I was reading your book, I keep thinking in the back of my head, and you said self-awareness is a key differentiator between successful and unsuccessful leaders. Expand that.
Yeah. Well, think of the opposite for a minute. Think of how many oblivious leaders there are out there. Most of us have worked. By the time you get to the 40 years old, you probably have worked for a bad leader at some point, a person who was pig-headed, who was super stubborn to the point of never listening to anybody else's ideas, and had blind spots that they weren't open to closing because nobody was going to tell them anything, because they were typically afraid of that leaders. So there's a lot of oblivion out there with some leaders. They get in their own way as a result of it. There will always be a blowback. There will always be a consequence. It can be late in their career, but there will be. So it becomes important. It becomes incumbent upon the leader. I don't care if you're new and you're 25 years old, just got put into your first management role, or if you're a grizzled old veteran, has been in the workforce and you only got 5 years left in your career. You still have to evaluate yourself to understand where you can situate yourself to be able to put your agency, your own influence, to add the most value and contribution to an organization. But you also got to know where I might get in my own way. Where's my leading edge? Where are the improvement opportunities, the stuff that I need to work on? And every leader, I don't care how seasoned you are, should be working on something. It might be patience, might be better time management, might be better organization, might be better sharing a vision, maybe communicating better, cooperating across the enterprise. Who knows what it is? But we all ought to be working on something, because leaders have to constantly improve. In the same way you're looking for constant improvement operationally and with your people, that would be irresponsible to expect it from all of them and not expect it from yourself at the same time and first.
You have a subtitle in this called Sunny Shadows, and this one caught my eye. You say, know thyself means knowing your sunshine. Bill, what are you trying to say here?
Yeah. So sunshine and shadows. I know there's been a tremendous amount written in the last, 10, 15 years about play to your strengths, right? And I get it, because that's where you're going to have the most passion. Your contribution is going to be higher. Your energy is going to be higher in those areas that you're strong at. Great. But we also have to recognize that pretty much anybody, that when you have a strength, when you take that past a certain point, it starts to cross a threshold of diminishing returns, and it casts a shadow. I'll share with you, Jay, from my own world. As you said in the introduction, I've done at least 1,000 workshops, many more. I've done 10 this month and a keynote. That's a lot of, being in front of groups. I'm leaving today, as you know. I'm going to be flying up to Chicago today to work with a workshop tomorrow and the next day in Chicago with 2 different groups. So I do this all the time. At 60 years old, and after having done thousands of workshops, I can confidently say I am comfortable in front of a group of people. I can captivate the attention of an audience. I think it's a strength of mine. I'm comfortable speaking articulately, although I couldn't with that word, and extemporaneously. But that's a bit of my sunshine. The shadow becomes when I have to be the center of attention. When I have to take the limelight, somebody else might say something. I'm like, yeah, but let me tell you my story. Or somebody says a story and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. And then I one up it. And I've been prone to doing any of those things. So I've got a strength, but the overuse of those strengths can start to have a blowback and start to cause the shadow. And that's true of anybody. A person might pride themselves on being, I am a critical thinker. I'm very critical with my thinking. And then you rip a hole in everybody else's work because you're always finding the pinpointed mistake in their work. And everybody's like, man, that guy's critical all the time. So now you've taken your great strength and it becomes overused. So not that you're looking at strengths and weaknesses, but you're looking at strengths. You got to be heads up about that, what I'm good at, and also heads up about, but when is this overused and what does that look like too? Because that's going to have a shadow.
That's beautiful. His name is Bill Treasure. The book, Leadership 2 Words at a Time, Simple Truths for Leading Complicated People. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, listen, Epic Physical Therapy, my physical therapist, I think they should be your physical therapist too, by the way. They work with professional athletes, but they work with people like you and me, whether we're injured or, coming out of surgery, whatever it may be. Maybe we just want to move better. Listen, if you want epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, just go to epicpt.com. That's epicpt.com. I promise you, that's the best place to start. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 38 years, they've been at the top of the real estate game. But you know what they do? They help people in life transition. Think about it. Every place that you've ever lived has been a transition in life. And they want to help make that next transition in your life as easy and as stress-free as possible so that you can live the life that you are hopeful to enjoy. So when you want to sell or buy a home and you want to transition to the next stage of life, go with the transition experts. Go with Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Bill Treasure, book Leadership 2 Words at a Time. And we're just digging into chapter 1 here. And there's something else in chapter 1 I want to talk about. And it's called, subtitles called Catalog Advantages. And you say, the conditions you were born into will have a huge impact on the person and leader you will become. And I think often we do not want to look back in order to look forward. But I think it's extremely important, don't you?
Oh, very much so. First of all, there's good and bad to it, right? Like I had a very close relationship with my grandmother. And my grandmother etched on my character in a good way. Gave me a conscience, helped polish the conscience, helped me learn a little bit about right and wrong, helped me understand the importance of listening to people, building trust and stuff. So I learned those things from her. So we can become puppets to the past, sometimes in a good way, the imprint that people leave on us. But we also have to be heads up about maybe gimmies that we had, advantages that we had. That other people may not have had. My grandmother's another good example of that. My grandmother, she didn't have a lot. In fact, the entire time I knew my grandmother, she lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And my brother and my sisters, we'd go over on the weekends and have a big sleepover and stuff. But she was a widower, and she didn't have much. She would literally save in her hand quarters so she could buy us presents at Christmas. On the other side of the family, my granddad, he owned a gas station, never went to college, didn't go into World War II. He worked in a munitions factory, but he built himself up and built a nice little business in Pelham Manor, New York. He had it's still there, a gas station. He no longer owns it. He's long gone. But it's good to know where we come from. What's your roots? What is it that the imprints, the echoes to the past, the ghosts that are informing who you are today? And sometimes you may have advantages that it helps you to recognize that you have, because you now can see the people that don't have those advantages and possibly the consequences of that. And all of us have advantages that we have. Sometimes you could use the word privileges. I have a friend of mine who says that she grew up somewhat poor. And she said, but that actually became a resource to her. She knows what it's like to experience want. She knows what it's like to be resourceful. You've met people who grew up in the Great Depression,
Sure.
right? Or on farms in Nebraska in the Great Depression, right?
Sure.
And they become very resourceful people. And so we all have privileges. You could have been poor growing up or wealthy growing up, and either of them have privileges. It's just, how do you take the grist of your own upbringing and use it for the good of the people who didn't have the privileges that you had?
Yeah. I think sometimes what happens is we just do not want to look back. And it's so important because who you are, right? Because one of the things that you say here at the end of this chapter is that the goal is to be fully comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
And your self-awareness should ultimately result in authenticity. And you have to take a look, the good and the bad, right? Because you have to take a look at that and go, okay, there were some things that weren't so good that I'm carrying with me as a leader that I probably need to correct. And at the same time, take the good things that you've had, that you've grown up with, and utilize those to your best ability. I think that's sometimes a difficult thing for leaders to do, is to take a look at the bad side rather than the good side, don't you?
Yeah, and the tee-ups that you had. I speak about it in one of those chapters. I had an interview with somebody for a job that I was not yet qualified for. It was my early, foray into organizational development to get a job. And I'm talking to the woman who's reading the resume, and she goes, "You went to West Virginia University?" I went to West Virginia University. We were in Georgia, where this job was going to be, and it was the click. It was all I needed to build goodwill to get the second interview, and I ended up working with that place. That was an advantage. It was a luck factor. That had I not just gone into that luck, maybe if I was somebody else who hadn't had that I went to the same college that she went to, I wouldn't have enjoyed the same privilege of the second interview, right?
Right.
So it's recognizing those moments that you had. Part of the point of that chapter is you didn't do it all by yourself. No leader did.
Right.
We all have moments where there's something that happens good in our direction. And sometimes it's subtle stuff like the ethnicity of our name. My name is Bill, right? My name is a pretty generic name. And the person reading your resume, if you have a name that doesn't fit their pattern of experience, they could mentally sort of make a biased decision on, he's not like me. And therefore, and even if it's at the subconscious level, it can become blockage to them bringing you in. So it's being aware of your own biases, being aware of your own advantages, and being aware of the disadvantages that other people may have. And you don't want to become an obstructionist to their success. You should go out of your way as a leader to figure out, how can I do right by others? And that might mean I have to move towards their experience, not just my experience.
That's so interesting you brought up names, because my real name is Julius. That's my real name. And I took a beating for it as a kid. And my mom called me Jay, J-A-Y. And so it's not my legal name, but it's been the name that has been given to me throughout my entire life, was Jay.
Right.
I've never gone by Julius. I never put Julius on a resume, ever, in anything I've ever done. I never put Julius, because Julius is such a unique name, and it was a hand-me-down. And so I've never used it.
Right.
Because just the thought that somebody because I was so ostracized as a kid when somebody found out my name was Julius, oh my gosh. I was teased mercilessly, and I hated it then. So, as an adult, I never use it, ever.
Isn't that interesting, right?
Yeah.
I hate to say it. We were probably smart too, because there's a lot of people, remember that oblivion factor again. If you're a leader who's got no sense of enlightenment, no self-awareness, you just sort of plodding along, you might not even know of the biases that you have that would cause you to not hire a guy named Julius.
Right.
There are people that there have been studies done, a very famous study where they would take a resume, it was an identical resume, and they would Angloize a name. They would give the name Luke, for example, right? Luke or Laura as the name on the resume. And then they would take the same exact qualifications, not change anything except the name, and give it a more non-Anglo sounding name. And which ones do you think would get hired more often, or at least put in the pile of we're going to interview this person,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And this,
Luke and Laura are good.
Luke and Laura. Let's hire Luke and Laura. They're pretty. Those are Americanized names. And the reality was, it didn't matter who was the person making the decision about the interview. In fact, it could be a person with a non-Anglo name that was making that decision. They would bring in Luke and Laura.
Right.
So
Right.
the studies on it are pretty interesting, right? Now, it's not a political thing. It's just
Right.
it's a consciousness thing. It's like that. Just be aware that we need to understand our root system, where we came from, the privileges that some of us have enjoyed, but you can take whatever privilege can be, the privilege of even being poor. What did the privilege give you? That you might be able to use for other. Like I said, in the Great Depression, resourcefulness is a privilege that now how do I teach other people the thing that I got that they might not have in terms of resourcefulness? So it's not a political thing, but it's being aware of what are the things that I maybe take for granted that can be an advantage for me that
Right.
I'm able to help bring to somebody else. And what do they have that I don't have that maybe I could use?
Right. It's fascinating, isn't it? The biases that we hold that we don't even know we have.
Yeah.
And we just let them pass by. I want to jump to chapter 3, and the 2 words we should say right. That's chapter 3. Aspire higher. What when you say aspire higher, what are we trying to get at there?
I think of my friends Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, who wrote the Leadership Challenge. Edition, sold millions of copies. Right. They are leadership researchers, really now leadership researchers emeritus. They wrote a book called Learning Leadership, and they're right. They said that leaders need to constantly ask them a 2-word question. They need to ask themselves a 2-word question, and the 2-word question is, what's better? What's better? That okay? We just high five everybody. We climbed this mountain over here. Good job. A lot of challenges. There's another mountain over there. What's better? How can we do that next time? But leaders need to ask that of themselves too. That I've achieved this thing. I've grown this competency. I have this skill. I've had this experience leading. I wonder what's better. Part of it is what's next. What is the 2.0 me? What is build treasure +1? What is +1ing, right?
Yeah.
So it's this idea that you're not done, that we are all on a journey and we are works in progress, and that sometimes we take 2 steps forward and only 1 step back, and hopefully we can reverse that equation. But aspiring higher means that we constantly need to demand more of ourselves and better of ourselves. That we don't graduate and say, ta-da, I've reached the nirvana of leadership, everyone. I have all the answers now.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. I'm sorry. You never reach the nirvana. I'd like to think that you'd like to think that you do. One of the things you say, though, under this is add value. And you say something really, really imperative here. Always deliver value far beyond your fees. That is not necessarily a mantra we hear espoused in today's world.
I think I was lucky in that I worked for a guy that remains a bit of a mentor to me today, 26 years after I worked for him. And I remember I was contributing to a memo that he was writing, and he inserted that line, and it was for a client that we always strive to deliver value beyond our fees. And I was like, damn, that's really a great aspiration. We should constantly, he's right, that they pay us something for the value that we provide. But in that exchange, if we really care about what we're delivering and we give a rip about our work, then we should be delivering more value for the fees that they pay us, because then we are competitive against people who are delivering just the standard amount of value. So that always stuck with me, and I think that should be the aspiration, is to, we don't want to just please our clients. We want to show them that we're in the boat with them, that our hand is on the oar, that we're pulling as vigorously and as hard, and that we're staying out in front of their needs, and that they said they wanted X, and we give them X, and we say, hey, here's +1 too. We're giving you something extra, or we researched something that you didn't ask us to, but we think could be helpful to you, not for self-interest, but for their interests.
That leads us right into chapter 4, gain control, be better for everyone through self-mastery. And I just thought that it was so important. We talk about mastery. Mastery seems to be a popular word in the literature right now. And you have this thing, you have 4 principles that make leadership so hard, but that we have got to continually work on ourselves. One is unpredictable people. The other is relentless demands, uncomfortable change, and there's no cavalry. When you start looking at those 4 things that make leadership so hard, and you think about it in terms of gaining control and being better for everyone through self-mastery, how do you put that together?
Well, first of all, I write books. I don't know that I always live it to the best of my ability. Sometimes I do not demonstrate personal mastery. Sometimes I'm out of control. But I've come to appreciate over time the need to not be a mess, and that means it has to start with your own personal sense of order and organization. Simple stuff. Do you write a to-do list every day? Right? Like I got my little to-do list. I'm 60 years old. I'm still doing a to-do list. Right? Do you manage your time well? That's a big one. I know a lot of leaders that struggle with that, particularly early on. Do you delegate? Right. So all of these things will help you gain more control over yourself in an uncontrollable world. And by the way, your own apple carts are going to get tossed up on many days.
Yeah.
But at least strive for to have your stuff together. And sometimes I don't use the word stuff, Jay, but have your stuff together, right? And so that's, I think, the spirit of that chapter.
Well, you spend a lot of time talking about self-care.
I do. Yes. And I think, and so, full confessional, I can tell this to you because, I had lost sight of that self-care stuff. And then COVID happened and I didn't get it, thank goodness. But I was home a lot. And so I did like a lot of people. I furiously worked on the treadmill trying to, because it gave me a sense of security in an insecure world. I'm just going to work my way through this. And then after a while, it was like, wait, you mean it's not going to be just 2 weeks? Oh, right? And so I had a little bit more time on my hands, and I recognized there were things that I had done 25, 30 years ago that had situated me and got me on my way. And part of it was reading spiritual literature in the morning. And so I started to reconnect with some of the authors that I had read way back when. And then I started reading a daily meditation. And then I heard a Ken Blanchard video, and Ken said, how do you start your day? And I thought, wow, that's a really provocative question. How do I start my day? Usually it's in an argument with one of my kids, my teens, or I'm just like, get right onto the computer and go into the thing and shoot down the interruptions of the day. And I started easing my way into the day. I started to tune myself up to the day. I would start with listening. Now, I will tell you, I'm in an out office. So my wife had built an out office for me right before COVID. It's a protected space. And I even have a loft up there if I could take a nap during the day. But I had that chair behind me, you see, and there's even some books there. That's my little corner where I could go in the morning now and first listen. And I would listen to birds singing outside. I listened to a dog barking in the neighborhood. These little girls would yell at their father on his way to work. They go, I love you, Daddy. I love you, Daddy. I love you. It was a great way to start the day. And then I would read a single page in a book called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, which I love, and Steve Hanselman, who also wrote the book with him. And it's a single page. I read a couple of a paragraph or a quote from a Stoic, like usually Marcus Aurelius, and then a few paragraphs, a single page. And after I had tuned up, and then I could move into my day. What did it take? 15 minutes on most days? Like oftentimes it's less than 15 minutes, but I got centeredness. And now when the interruptions came, instead of being stressed and then transmitting that stress to people, I'm now bringing the peace and stability or sanity in an otherwise insane world. And I've carried that practice. I read it today. And when I don't, either I bring the book with me or I take a picture of that page and I bring it with me. So yeah, gaining control, I think, starts with that question. How do you start your day? Turn off the shock jock. Don't be looking at one of those political stations in the morning for angertainment. Instead, ease your way in. If nothing else, do what Ben Franklin did. It's in his autobiography. Start the day by asking this question. He called it the morning question. What good shall I do today? What good in the world shall I do today? And then he would end his day with the evening question. That's what he called it, the morning question, the evening question. The evening question, what good in the world have I done today? If nothing else, start your day with that.
That's beautiful. His name is Bill Treasurer. He's so good, isn't he? The book, Leadership 2 Words at a Time. Simple truths for leading complicated people. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Folks, Epic Physical Therapy. I do talk about them often because I love them and they're awesome. They've helped me a bunch. They have the most advanced top of the line equipment, things like the Alter G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, the Game Ready, which is one of my favorites. That's like ice cold water and compression all at the same time. It's amazing. They're trained and certified in the most comprehensive cutting edge treatments like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. That's just a few. When you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 38 years, they've been helping people transition in life because every place you've ever lived has been a transition in life. They want to help you too. They've successfully have done that with thousands of people, and they from all over the world. They would love to be a part of your life transition as well. So when ready to sell your home or buy your next home, you know what? Talk to Linda Craft Team, the transition experts. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Bill Treasurer. And I hope you're enjoying the experience as much as I am, because I'm actually having a really great time with you here doing this.
Well, me too, for sure.
Okay, good. Part 2. Let's jump into part 2 of the book called Leading People. You jump right out and you say, the old saying is true. If you claim to be a leader and you turn around and nobody's following you, you're not a leader. You're just out for a walk. So let's talk about chapter 7, trust first.
Yeah.
I think this is a huge concept, and it's one that I think is the most difficult of everything I read. I feel like this is possibly one of the most difficult things for people to do is trust first. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So there are definitely trust experts out there, and I'm not a trust expert, but I offer my reflections on trust based on my experiences having worked with thousands of leaders. But I think of the work of my friends Michelle and Dennis Reyna, and they wrote a book called Trust and Betrayal in the Workforce, because they started doing interviews with about 200 executives, and then we're going to write the definitive book on trust. And as they got into their stories, a lot of stories would turn on the pivot of some betrayal. And so they realized that this is kind of the shadow that we've got to also include. And I think, by the time, again, you get up to 40 years old, you've been burned at some point.
Sure.
And you might have done the burning at some point too.
Absolutely.
And so I think it gets hard to trust when you have gotten burned for trust at some point in time. And then it really takes courage to be willing to trust again. Because as we all know, trust is the currency. Trust is the bond and the glue that holds and lubricates relationships and hold them together. So if you can't figure out how to get to trust, you're not going to have strong relationships with people. And we know how important relationships are in an organization. And, one of the things is I remember doing a program once with a group of lawyers, and we did a session and we did a segment and we had them fill in the blank to this statement. I will trust you when ... What is your criteria for trust? And there's like a continuum, right? There's some people who are like, I will trust you. Oh, I would start from trust, and you could even mess up again. And I'm just a trusting person by nature. And then you've got other people like, I will never trust you ever. If I've got to put my name on something that you are doing, I'm going to red pen it and red pen it again. And I'm not going to make sure that it's done until it's done to my satisfaction. I will never trust.
The voices are priceless. I just love the voices. They're awesome.
I've worked with both those people. So I think it's being clear-headed about what's your own criteria for trust, and when might your impression of others, are you a jaded person? Did you get burned and from somebody 3 people ago, and you're carrying it into this relationship to somebody who hasn't done anything to violate that trust, and it can get in the way. So trusting first really is about courage. I wrote about it in my book, Courage Goes to Work, and then I sort of bring it forward into this book, is that you instead of waiting for the other person to prove to me, I'll trust you after you prove to me you could be trusted. The other person's like, well, hey, buddy, why don't you prove it to me? I'm like, oh, no, I asked you first. You prove it to me first. Well, no, you prove it to me. And we get in trust stalemates, right?
Right.
Somebody's got to put down the weapons and get this arm and say, you know what? I'm going to trust you. I'm going to I'm going to extend this trust to you. And it takes courage to do that because you might get hurt, but you also might find that this person doesn't let you down, does an awesome job, frees you up to do more passionate stuff that you want to do anyway. So, trust is super important.
Well, and I started to have a thought about trust as I was reading this chapter, and I highlighted so much of it. And I started thinking about, from a leadership standpoint, the leader who thinks he's trustworthy, but his people don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, and this goes back to, the hubris chapter, right? Our own arrogance,
Yeah.
right? Where we can believe that we're trustworthy. Well, I'm trustworthy, but your people don't think you're trustworthy.
Yeah. Right. You're right. And it does connect to the hubris idea, because it's also like, when you ask a person on a survey, how humble are you? I'm a 5. I'm a 5 out of 5 on humility. I am the most humble. All right, humblest. I'm the winner of the humblest award. Right? It's like, I'm a trusting person. I am. You're probably the last person that should be asked. It's really the people around you that we can tell whether they, in fact, feel that you, I think that one of the central things about trust is, do you listen deeply to somebody else, and really, without formulating your response and stuff, but really present yourself with that person, attend to the human in front of you and listen. And that's a great way of showing that you value somebody. And there's a certain humility in listening to another person and not having to be the person with the right answer, and inviting the input of the other. And so I think trusting, that's one thing that can go a long way towards trust. But you're right that you may think that you're super trustworthy,
Right.
and cut people off at the past and not listen to them and interrupt them, and then show up to the meeting late because you can. So your own behavior is where trust shows or not.
And that leads me to the next piece of it that I just pulled out of this. And that was, okay, I say I trust you, but my first words are, we need more accountability.
Right.
And I trust you, but we're going to need to be really accountable here. And then we start micromanaging.
Right. Yeah. It's fear-based.
Right.
I'm afraid you're going to let me down.
Right.
You're not going to get the thing done. It's the pandemic, when people were working from home, a lot of senior executives sort of broke out in hives, right? Because they're used to BIS, butts in seats. When I can see you in that seat, I know you're being productive. But now you're home. I don't know. I gotta. But then they found that they were productive, right? So
Right.
I think a lot of people sort of recognize that. Oh wait, maybe we can actually get this done. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things in here that just really struck me, and man, it stopped me dead in my tracks, is you asked a question to a group of people one time that said, which is more difficult for you, trusting yourself or trusting others? And I don't know if you remember the story about the woman
Yeah.
at the end. Tell the story, how they responded after you asked that question, and then the one woman who gave a different response.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll do groups of a couple hundred, and I'll do a poll everywhere where I put real time polling behind their texting their answers. And one of the questions that I would put out there is, which is more challenging for you, trusting others or trusting yourself? And almost everybody will say trusting others, but here there was like 2 people out of 100 that said trusting themselves. And that always catches not just my attention, but everybody in the audience are like, why would you have a hard time trusting yourself? You know yourself. So I invited, I said, if you're willing to share with us, it could be instructive for the rest of the group, who probably is perplexed by seeing somebody not trust themselves as much as they would trust the people around them. And this woman got up in front of a group of, like I said, a couple hundred people, and said, I get in trouble if I trust myself too much. I've been sober for, I think she said, 4 years. I haven't had a drink in 4 years, but I caused a lot of wreckage before that in my life. And if I take for granted the sobriety that I have to earn on a daily basis, 24 hours at a time, and I suddenly think that, oh, hey, I got this, then that's the day I'm probably going to have a slip. So I got to make sure that I don't fully trust myself. to keep myself sober one day at a time. And I just, I love that because
Wow.
I think it's real. I think it's honest. I think we give ourselves a lot more credit for that. We're the ones who get trust right. We're the ones who are accountable. I'm the one who's humble. It's everybody else I need to change because they're not getting it right. Right. But here's a woman being totally authentic, cards on the table in front of everybody.
That was such a powerful story because when you said, because I didn't know where you were going to go with it. And then when you got there and she talks, listen, I'm in a 12-step program and this is a daily thing. I went, well, it doesn't just have to be for alcohol. Right. I mean, there's parts of our lives that we probably really don't trust if we would really be honest. Right.
Yeah.
Because we all have those things that we could slip into at any point in time. I just thought it was a powerful story. And it reminded me of it removes me into the little section you have of connected hearts. And you start off by saying that some leaders give off vibes that make everyone around them uneasy. And then you say they aren't really leaders. They're rulers. But yet we want to have connected hearts. Help us make that bridge.
Yeah. So I think a critical question that all leaders need to ask themselves is, do you want to lead or do you want to rule? Rulership is kind of easy and it's kind of the oldest form of leadership. I tell you, you shut your mouth and just do it. I don't need any grief. I don't need any back talk. I don't need questioning. I need you to do what I need you to do. Get it done. That's like being in the salt mines in Egypt with a whip in your hand, being like cracking on the backs of people to get things done. You may not recognize that it is, but that's rulership. That's not leadership. That's not bringing the best out of people and encouraging them to more performance and taking patient time to develop them and mentoring them and such. And yet a lot of leaders still lead in that kind of really old-fashioned way. So if you lead, through just your cerebellum, through your cerebral means, that I'm just going to use my intellect as a leader. I can think my way through this situation. You'll be disconnected from the passion start, the emotion place, the empathy place that builds the trust. I share in that chapter about Rodin, the guy who, he did the great statue of the thinker, right? And he did the statue of the lovers, and he did the statues, great sculpture artist, right? And there's a sculpture that he did called the Gates of Hell. And no, I didn't read this in a book. I just noticed it myself when I was in Paris and I looked at it. It was intriguing to me that at the very top of the gates of hell, the entrance to the gates of hell, was the thinker. And my interpretation of that is that if you are trying to deal with your life only through your brain, disconnected from your heart, because we're human beings, we need both. We need our emotions. We need the, irrationality and the rationality. We need the emotions and we need the rationality. But if you're only going to lead through your brain, your intellect, you're going to make decisions that are rationalistic, but maybe disconnected from your humanity. And so that's what I meant by disconnected hearts.
Wow. That's beautiful, man. I'm serious. You're so good. Well, we've done our hour. So tell people and you've been great, by the way, as always. So tell people how they get a hold of you.
Well, first of all, I had too much coffee. That's what so if I talk fast, I apologize to your listeners. So they can get in touch with me at couragebuilding.com. It's the easiest way. You can also be treasurer at giantleapconsulting.com. But Che, what a pleasure. I really dig it when somebody like you gets into the book. Really, I saw, you put the yellow highlighter stuff, and it shows me you honored the work. And I really appreciate it because you sort of get what the book is all about. And I think it makes for a good interview because of it. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Stay with me. Folks, this is the show. You know what I say to you every week, right? You're in control of three things in your life, regardless of your circumstances: your attitude, your effort, and getting back up again, your resiliency. I know that situations can be tough and they can be difficult, but you can control those three things: your attitude, your effort, that's your excellence, and your resiliency, getting back up again. Take control of those things now. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It's going to be another great show. As I say to you every week, all over the world, thank you so much. And ciao, everybody.